Have you ever been told something about yourself that was a complete shock to you, but weirdly obvious to everyone else? Those moments, right there, those are your blind spots. They're these hidden parts of who we are that can, without us even knowing it, hold us back in our careers, our relationships, pretty much everywhere. So let's dive in and figure out how to bring these hidden parts of ourselves out into the light. Now, to really get a sense of how big this challenge is, check this out. The organizational psychologist Dr. Tasha Eurich ran a massive study, and what she found was, well, staggering. It turns out that 95% of people believe they're self-aware, but the reality, only about 10 to 15% of us actually are. That huge gap, that 80-point difference you see there, that's where our blind spots live and thrive. It's a massive sign that most of us just aren't seeing ourselves as clearly as we think we are. So you gotta ask, why is that gap so massive? Is there something wrong with us? Absolutely not. Here's the thing. Not being able to see our own flaws isn't a personal failing. It's a biological feature. Our brains are literally hardwired with these powerful mechanisms that are designed to protect our sense of self. And sometimes that protection comes at the cost of seeing ourselves clearly. To put a more formal frame on this, we can look to the Johari window, which is a classic model in psychology. It basically divides our awareness up into 4 different areas. The one we really care about right now is the blind spot. This area represents all the things about you that other people can see plain as day. Your habits, the way your tone shifts, your go-to reactions, but you are completely, totally unaware of them. It's the critical stuff you don't even know you don't know. So what's the actual mechanism behind all this? Well, Sigmund Freud called this part of our mind the ego. And maybe the best way to think about your ego is like having your own personal defense lawyer on call 24/7. Its main job, its only job really, is to shield you from the pain and anxiety that comes from self-criticism. So anytime a flaw gets pointed out, the ego immediately jumps to its feet to object and defend you from feeling bad about yourself. So how exactly does this lawyer argue the case? Well, its first and most basic move is just plain old denial. This is when the brain simply refuses to accept a painful reality. Someone might suggest you have a bit of a temper, and the ego's immediate defense is, no, I'm not hot-tempered, I'm just passionate, and you're misinterpreting it. It's a complete rejection of the evidence, all to avoid the discomfort of the truth. The next tool the ego pulls out is a little more clever. It's called rationalization. With this one, we don't deny that something happened, but we come up with a really logical-sounding excuse to justify it and, shift the blame. We tell ourselves, oh, I was late because the traffic was an absolute nightmare, and we conveniently forget that we left the house 20 minutes late. It just feels so much better to be a victim of traffic than the cause of our own lateness. And this brings us to one of the most interesting defenses of all, projection. This is where we take a negative quality that we have, and instead of seeing it in ourselves, we see it in everybody else. So a person who might be really selfish will constantly complain that their friends only ever think about themselves. The ego gets rid of the unwanted trait by basically spotting it everywhere else except in the mirror. Okay, so we get it. Blind spots are real, and our brains are literally designed to hide them from us. That can feel a little hopeless. But here's the good news. We are not powerless here. Let's walk through 3 really powerful tools you can start using right away to see yourself more clearly. First up is the mirror rule. The idea here is that the outside world often acts like a mirror for our inner world. So you want to pay really close attention to the things that trigger a big, almost out of proportion emotional reaction in you. For example, if you find yourself getting super annoyed by a coworker who's always bragging, the mirror rule asks you to pause and think, could it be that I secretly want that same recognition, but I feel like I can't get it? Your own frustration can be a compass pointing straight back at you. The second tool is just brutally logical. It's about finding the common denominator. I mean, think about it. If the same negative pattern keeps showing up in your life over and over with different people and different situations, well, the only thing that's been there every single time is you. If you had problems with your boss at company A, and then your team at company B, and now your clients at company C, it's so tempting to blame the world. But it's way more powerful to ask, what am I doing that's creating the same result again and again? And the third tool is this amazing little formula from a type of therapy called DBT. It says, suffering equals pain times resistance. Now, pain is just a part of life. We all have setbacks, it's unavoidable. But suffering? That's the extra misery we create when we fight against the pain. It's that voice in our head screaming, this shouldn't be happening to me. That resistance, that refusal to accept what is, That's like a giant, flashing neon sign pointing directly to one of our blind spots. Okay, theory is great and all, but let's make this real. Seeing how these blind spots actually show up in everyday life is where the light bulbs really start to go off. So let's look at two super common examples. First, let's meet the lonely hero. We all know this person. They're always complaining about being overworked, saying things like, if you want something done right, you just have to do it yourself. From their point of view, they're the only responsible one, the savior. But their blind spot is a massive need for control. This comes out as micromanagement, which of course stops their team from ever learning or taking ownership. So they actually create the very problem they're complaining about because they can't let go and trust other people. And next, we have the unfortunate victim. Their story is always, I'm such a good person, I sacrifice everything for others, and they just walk all over me. They see themselves as a martyr. But what they don't see, their blind spot, is a serious lack of personal boundaries. They give and give, not always from generosity, but from a deep need to be liked and validated. And ironically, that behavior invites people to take them for granted. They're unknowingly teaching people how to treat them poorly, and then they feel hurt when it happens. So here's the most important part of all of this. Just identifying these patterns is a huge first step, a massive leap forward. But awareness by itself doesn't really change anything, does it? The whole point is to turn what you've learned into actual, meaningful action. So here are your first two practical steps to get you started on this journey. First, I want you to try an emotional audit, just for 1 week. That's it. Every single time you feel frustrated or angry or disappointed, just pause. And instead of blaming someone else, ask yourself one simple question. What was my contribution to this situation? It's not about taking all the blame, it's just about owning your part. Second, seek out some courageous feedback. Pick one person in your life that you really truly trust. Ask them this exact question. What is one habit that you think is holding me back that I might not be able to see myself? And now for the golden rule, and this is absolutely critical. Your only allowed response is 2 words. Thank you. That's it. No defending, no explaining, just listen and say thank you. All right, so let's tie this all together. Here are the key things to remember. First, the 95% illusion. Chances are we're not as self-aware as we think. Second, your ego is that defense lawyer, always using denial, rationalization, and projection to protect you. To get past it, you can use the mirror rule, look for the common denominator in your life, and pay attention to the suffering formula. And finally, the most important part, action is everything. You have to turn awareness into action with things like an emotional audit and asking for that courageous feedback. We've gone through the what, the why, and the how of our hidden selves. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is what you do with this knowledge. The power isn't in knowing about your blind spots, it's in having the courage to face them. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Today, right now, which of your blind spots are you finally ready to look at?